problem is highly complex. And two, while there is a collective will to move the organization forward, there is little consensus as to the gravity of the existing problem.
Major General Chris Whitecross talking today about the differing views on how widespread sexual misconduct is in the military. Remember, Major General Whitecross, been on this program, is leading the Department of National Defense's response to a very damning report on the culture of sexism, harassment, and assault in the ranks. Today, she appeared at the committee delving into the issue, and she promised to adopt all 10 recommendations from the former Supreme Court Justice Murray Deschamps. Remember, originally they'd adopted 2 and 8 only in principle. How committed is the military to change when there's such widespread disagreement on the scope of the problem, and what short-term steps should be taken to eradicate sexual misconduct? In the foyer, James Bezan, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence, is here. Jack Harris, the NDP's defence critic, and Joyce Murray, the Liberal defence critic. Great to have all 3 of you here. Mr. Bezan, obviously the top question is, and we've been asking this for a while, why didn't the Minister of Defence, Jason Kenney, why didn't the Chief of the Defence Staff, General Tom Lawson, or even the incoming Chief of the Defence Staff, the designate, Lieutenant General Vance, come to committee today to answer questions about such a critical issue?
Well, as you can tell, that we did have 2 important people there, being General Whitecross and Madame Deschamps, to talk about the report. It is a situation where we set this up on fairly tight time schedule. This was one time that we could get Major General Christine Whitecross before committee, before she starts again doing her cross-Canada and around the world consultation on how we move forward on setting up the independent center to look at sexual harassment. But I can tell you that Minister Kenney is always willing to come before committee as time permits. As we saw just a couple of weeks ago when he was at committee, he spent 2 hours going over the estimates and answering questions that was asked of him about the Deschamps report and the strategic response team that's been stood up by the CDS to ensure that we deal with this in a very effective and responsible manner.
Mr. Harris, what's your take? I mean, is there been enough accountability? Would you have liked to have seen the Defense Minister and or the CDS there, or was General Whitecross enough?
Well, first of all, it was my request to Minister Kenney to come to the committee. He said yes.
And he still is willing to do that.
Hold on. As long as he was in the country, he'd be available. He was in the country. He was in QP today. He had another meeting. I'm sick of hearing I have another meeting. Oh. This is an important event. And the problem here, and this is, I mean, General Whitecross just alluded to in your clip, this is a question of leadership. You know, if there's no consensus within the military of how serious the problem is what she said, then clearly the leadership is what has to make the decisions here. The Chief of Defence Staff, most senior military leader, the Minister of Defence, accountable on behalf of the government to the public of Canada and to the Parliament. He wasn't there, and neither of them were there. Major General, Major General Whitecross is very sincere. She's very committed herself, but she can't do this. You can't. You know, this is a problem that goes from the very bottom of the military to the very top, and to change that culture, when are we going to know? When are we going to know that it's safe for my children or your children to go into the military and not be sexually assaulted and to be looked after? That's the problem. We can't wait for culture to change. That could take some time. So what kind of assurances can the men and women who are already there in uniform, or parents whose sons or daughters who want to go into the military, they're going to be safe and they're going to be protected? That's the leadership question.
Joyce Murray, did Major General Whitecross not answer that question today?
Well, she answered a lot of questions, but as I think, as Jack was saying, she's a competent and caring person, but it's the process that's broken. There's a systemic culture of hostile sexualization in the military. I think all Canadians, I mean, think about parents of young people, especially young people in the Canadian Armed Forces. Very concerning, high priority for action. We want to see something decisive from the minister, and he has been pretty much missing in action since the beginning of this issue. Never made a statement, wasn't at the launch of the action plan, and failed to come to the committee today. And that's not acceptable. I mean, this is, Evan, this is a shameful situation. It is fixable with a lot of will and a proper process, and right from bottom up and top down intention, and we don't have that leadership.
Maybe, Mr. Bezan, can you just clarify? I mean, and I asked this to Major General Whitecross when she was on this program. Who's accountable here? I mean, there's been a problem of a culture of sexual harassment. Yeah. I have seen not one person stand up and say, I should have stopped it, I let this happen. Who has been accountable for letting a culture of sexual harassment flourish inside the military? That was what the report says. Where has the accountability been?
Well, you know, we've only had the report for just around a month now.
Well, the minister had it for another month and a half.
Well, no, and you know, so right away we've already have Major General Whitecross appointed to stand up the strategic response team. They are looking at all 10 recommendations, and definitely part of this is
that's not accountability. To be fair, that's not accountability. There's not a single person has stood up and said, I ignored this. There hasn't been a single case that I've seen where the leadership said, I mean, a year earlier, the leadership did their internal report and they thought everything was great. It turned out that was completely inaccurate. Who did that report? Why isn't that person?
Right, and the Chief of Defence Staff is accepting all 10 recommendations, as the government is, and we're going to make sure that all components of the Deschamps report.
But we don't know what's coming out of those recommendations yet. I mean, one of the things we did learn today, and Madame Deschamps, you know, to her full credit, emphasized and underlined 4 or 5 or 6 times today the importance of the actual total independence of this body that's going to deal with these the initial complaints, independent of the Canadian Armed Forces, as far away as possible. She said, and that it could be in the Department of Defense, but not reporting to the military. But that's not included in the even the letter where General Lawson had to come out with after CBC ran the story on the initial instructions. Even that letter contemplates reporting to the CDS as a result of the studies of the recommendations they accepted in principle. You know, that hasn't been changed. So we're not sure yet that the actual implementation, they're accepted in principle, they're going to study it for 6 or 8 months.
The question is,
after the election, we'll get a report back, and then we'll see what'll come of it. But we don't have faith at the moment that this is actually going to happen.
Joyce Murray.
Evan, I have a question of James. If the CDS is the person accountable, and the Chief of Defence Staff laid out an order, a direction to Major General Whitecross that actually really limits and constrains what she can do. Why, I mean, and apparently that order has never been rescinded. Why has it not been rescinded? Why has the minister not ordered the CDS to take back that order so that Major General Whitecross actually can accept some of the core recommendations like independence? Why not?
But General Whitecross said quite clearly today at committee that she is moving forward on all 10 recommendations, including having that independent.
But she said her order has not been rescinded.
Let Mr. Bezan talk. Mr. Bezan, go ahead.
Okay, Evan, as General Whitecross has said, that you know, the directive was there based upon some assumptions, and not all those assumptions became fact. Based upon the final report, based upon the 10 recommendations came forward, we're working on a whole new directive now, and she's taking her directive from the
No, there's no new directive. It's the same old directive.
What you said, though,
twisting the words and the assumptions that were based on that original directive, and that is not in play anymore. We're moving on a whole new mandate.
What you've said and what she said today was that we're moving to study the recommendations. For example, for the case of the independent group, as to what the best.
Let's remember what she's studying. She's looking at the Americans,
what the best model is, and she's going to report back to the CDS, and a decision is going to be made. So there's no decision as to what's going to
happen. Just for time.
Here's another key concern: is that one of the groups that are most affected by the hostile climate are the LGBTQ community. And when I asked the General Whitecross who on her team of 25 that are looking at how to fix this problem are from the LGBTQ community, she had no idea. So I think most Canadians would think that it's fair enough for that community to have a say in developing solutions against for the harassment that they experience.
Before I let you go, I just want you all, a new voice entered the discussion today, and I'll leave you with this. This is Andre Morin, who is, of course, the Ontario Ombudsman now. He has a report on Hydro One today, but he's the former military ombudsman. And let me just show you what he said about this. He says you don't need a new process. You need the military ombudsman to step in and do the job. Listen to what he said.
This is an important issue. It's prevalent in society. And the military wanting to create another military body to deal with sexual harassment, that should be the military ombudsman's office. I don't understand why you need more bureaucracy. What you need is action, and it's missing in action.
Yeah, well,
So there's a lot. Unfortunately for time, I got to let you go. I know you're going to continue talking about that, but there's a former military officer saying it's that office's job. James Bezan, Jack Harris, Joyce Murray, lots to discuss. Unfortunately for time today, I got to leave it there. But always good to see the three of you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Coming up on this program, thousands of Ontario high school students might be going back to school this week. Might. Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne tabled back to work legislation today. Very controversial. Why does she say she's disappointed with the NDP? What are the teachers going to say? The CBC's Mike Crawley has the details next. Stay with us.